if you know one thing about me, and if you know one thing about Gavin as well, is that we absolutely love following the polls. I'm a poll believer. I don't trust any singular poll. I like to scrutinize the way that the poll was conducted. And I also really am an RCP guy. I believe, because of the margin of errors and all that, you really need to be looking at lots of polls, averages, seeing how they intersect with one another. And one of the things that I have been noticing is that the chickens are about to start really coming home to roost. So in August, I believe it was August 6th, it was the day that both candidates had for the first time announced the VPs and the top of the ticket that would be on the ballot. We said it was going to be a landslide. We said it wasn't going to be close for Kamala Harris. And all of the polling that's come out, despite the waves of dissenters, despite the Nate Silvers of the world, despite all of the Sagar and Jetties who want you to believe that this is still a tight race. No, we said it's not a tight race. And finally, Gavin, the polls are catching up with our prognostication, with our foresight, with our political analysis. This is the one I was talking about because Quinnipiac is a pretty reputable poll. I think Gavin would sign off on that. And you have Pennsylvania, 51%, Trump, 45%, Stein, 1%, Oliver, 1%. I looked at this and I said, this might be slightly over favoring Kamala, but this is right around where I'm kind of anticipating. This also leaves Michigan, where even with Jill Stein getting 2% of the support, which I wouldn't be shocked by given the large density of Muslim American voters there, people who would be large. We can't forget the uncommitted movement originated out of Michigan. They have chosen not to endorse Kamala Harris as of today. They're not endorsing Donald Trump, and they're not endorsing the Green Party, but you could imagine that might lead to a swelling in Michigan. So you've got Harris still up by 5, and that's with Stein at 2%. And I think, that might be a little generous come election day. Then you have Harris up by 1% in Wisconsin. This is all within the margin of error, a potential runaway victory for Kamala Harris. And I just think that's where the momentum is going, guys. The active, vilification of black men by the Donald Trump campaign, I think is going to devastate them in Michigan. I think it's going to devastate them in Wisconsin. And I think it's going to devastate them across the country, because where people may have been compelled to sympathize with Donald Trump's business first capitalist message, nobody wants to be made out to be a criminal. Nobody wants to be made out to be a sexual villain. And I think feeding into that narrative is what's led to a lot of this rift, where if it had been Joe Biden, you wouldn't see polls like this.
Yeah. I think that, obviously we'll have to wait to see for sure, but I think that there's a very, very strong chance that Bill Maher actually was 100% right about the whole, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats thing being the last straw for a lot of Americans who were still considering voting Donald Trump or sympathizing with his viciously anti-immigrant message. And it kind of reminds me, actually, the whole Haitian pet eating fake news controversy. It reminds me of the Imani Khalif controversy that we covered. You guys remember during the Olympics, there was that Algerian boxer, biological female, but a bunch of crazy transphobes decided to make up a fake story about how she was actually a man or a trans person or whatever, and how this was, a brutal beating of a biological woman by a male on live television, all this crazy stuff. And at the time, I was like, don't get me wrong, this is scary for trans people. It obviously represents a new low for the TERFs, but I also think that it could incur significant backlash for that movement, for the transphobes and for the TERFs, right? I think that when people realize that they've been duped and that these hateful bigots are trying to manipulate us all with fake news, I think that's going to incur backlash. In the same way, I think that Donald Trump going out there and just blatantly making up the most viciously disgusting lie rooted in age-old stereotypes. I think that, it would be one thing if that was true. It would be one thing if there actually were Haitians eating pets in Ohio, but it's not true. And it doesn't take very long to realize that. I think probably most Americans have, been caught up to speed by now, and they realize, no, Donald Trump actually just made that up to try to divide the country further. And people, I don't think they like that, right? In the same way that I think the Algerian boxer story ultimately represented a setback for the TERFs, I think that this Haitian dog and cat thing represents a setback for not only the Trump campaign, but this entire vicious strain of xenophobic, bigotry, which is increasingly prevalent in European politics and is also increasingly prevalent in American politics. It's really the driving engine of the whole MAGA movement, this anti-immigrant sentiment. It has been all the way back since 2016 with Build the Wall. But do you agree, Zach, that the whole fake news, eating the dogs, eating the cats thing, that people actually might respond in a way where they're like, I don't like being manipulated, I don't like being lied to?
100%. He's finally jumped the shark, guys. He's finally having to account for the lies, for the racism, for the fact that he isn't delivering anything of substance, the fact that he has concepts of a plan but no actual plan, the fact that he has absolutely no intention to deliver anything but another tax break for the rich. And that is also being evident. So I showed you guys some swing state polls because swing states matter, right? Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. I personally believe she's going to win Nevada and Arizona. I think either North Carolina or Georgia also goes blue. I have her with at least 303 electoral college votes, and I have since August 6th. Okay. But what I will say is Donald Trump has never in his life, Gavin, he's never in his life won an election by the popular vote. He's never signed up for a race and got more votes, I guess, outside of a primary, right? But no real election, no election where you actually win the prize. Okay. And what do we know factually about Americans after you've lost a presidential race? You are far less likely. Let's talk about it like sports analysts. Once you're far less likely to win again. It's only happened one time in the history of America. I believe it was Grover Cleveland. People can fact check me on that. But we look at this national election poll, this national voter turnout poll, which says 52.7 in people, as opposed to Donald Trump's 47.3 individuals are going to show up and vote for Kamala Harris. That is with a poll that has a 3.1% margin of error. What does that mean? It means potentially 56% almost of the people show up for Kamala Harris, and only 44% of the people show up for Donald Trump. Now, I'm not forecasting exactly that, but these are the kind of numbers that are already spilling out. Okay. And these were not the numbers that were spilling out when Joe Biden was the nominee, which leads me to believe they're more correct. And do you know why? It goes back to the theory that I put forward a little bit later, Gavin. While the Republicans are going down the road of the Imani Khalif, as you expertly laid out, while the Republicans are going down the road of lying about pets, of, they're going to come to your town and rape you, they're fear-mongering about all of that. What the American people are doing is they're simply just shrugging and saying, you know what, we're going to pick the better candidate. We're going to pick the better candidate. In 2020, better candidate was Joe Biden. Okay. I disagree with the American people in 2016, but you can see how they decided to reject Hillary Clinton because she was potentially the worst candidate of all time. Now, you can talk about from a left perspective all you want till the cows come home about why you think Kamala Harris is a bad candidate and a bad person. To the general American public, she is not.
Yep. Also, I think a lot of people miss in their analysis of 2016 a very simple fact that actually led me from the very beginning to correctly predict a Trump victory. That's the pendulum effect. People need to talk more about this, guys. If one political party has been in power for 8 years, for a full presidential tenure, it's almost mathematically guaranteed that the pendulum is going to swing in the other direction because the American people just hate the status quo. So if a Democrat's been in charge for 8 long years, they're going to say, hey, maybe the Republican Party is better. And they're going to vote in a Republican. Same thing if a Republican's been in power for 8 years, most likely the Americans are going to elect a Democrat afterward. Of course, you can find examples of times in history where that hasn't happened. I'm not saying it's totally unprecedented, but for the most part, you can almost mathematically bet on the pendulum swinging on an 8-year basis. That's why, again, Kamala's in a better situation than Hillary was, not only because she's an infinitely more likable candidate that's much better at campaigning, but also, she's only dealing with the past 4 years of Democrat controlled, not 8 like Hillary was. Also, I mean, come on, Hillary was just coming off of Benghazi. She was just coming off of all of these, the Libya thing, the Clinton Foundation scandal, the emails, the private server, the FBI investigation. I mean, it really cannot be overstated what a terrible candidate Hillary Clinton was, and just how lucky Donald Trump got in 2016, guys. It's unfathomable, and I continue to just it makes my blood boil. I'm so livid to this day at the Democratic Party for conspiring conspiring to undermine who was the clearly superior candidate in the primary, Bernie Sanders, someone who could have cleaned Trump's clock, even with the pendulum madness that I just discussed.
100%. So I don't know, Gavin, if the election were held today, do you what swing states are you giving Kamala? Everybody already knows the big one. So, we know she's winning the blue states, Trump's winning the deep red states, but what are the states you believe as of today are in play for Kamala Harris?
I think all of them are in play, to be honest. I think Arizona, even North Carolina, Georgia's in play. Obviously, I think she's most likely going to win Pennsylvania, Michigan. I think they're all in play, man. I really do.
What's the dark horse? What's the surprise one that you think she gets or loses?
I mean, we were talking a little bit about this yesterday. I'm not actually predicting it, but wouldn't it be glorious, guys? Wouldn't it be glorious if JD Vance and Donald Trump, if they lose Ohio, JD's own home state? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying it's even on the table, but wouldn't it be glorious?
Wouldn't it be nice? Yeah. Oh, gosh, that'd be glorious. And especially given the fact that we haven't really touched on this on the show, there's a shit ton of crypto money that's being dumped into the Sherrod Brown race. And that seat might actually be in jeopardy. And that's a reliable, blue vote in the Senate. He's not, a hero, but he's, I would say, on the progressive half of the Democratic Party if you were to divide it in two.